Welcome along to this video, top 5 tips for refurbishment, and who better to join me than a lady who has done 134 refurbs over a period of 42 years. It's Sue Elkington. And Sue, thank you so well. Rupert's gone now.
That's it. But the cat's away. That's over. That's fine. That's fine. We can focus now.
Yeah, we can. Thank you for joining me. And, you know, with your 42 years experience, you have seen it all. So you've come up with kind of 5 tips for us, haven't you?
Yeah.
And at number 1, it's really don't believe the hype.
Yeah, be very, very cautious about being taken in too much, especially with the TV programmes that we see now. And I get very, very upset, and I'm screaming at the TV quite often when I look at the mathematics. And also bear in mind that for every success that you see, there's probably 3 or 4 failures at the back of that. So they're not going to show you the ones that don't get there. They're going to show you the ones that do very well. So TV programmes, be very, very cautious about just taking it for granted that that's how it's going to be, because it isn't. There's an awful lot more involved. There's a big movement out there as well of people doing property training. Now, property training in itself can teach you methodology, it can teach the theory, it can teach you all about how you might go about acquiring property and the theory of purchasing, finding and purchasing property. But there's very little out there that actually tells you what to do when the keys are in your hand. And that is the most important part of it. It's like taking your driving test. It's been great up until that point, and then if you're not competent to take that car out on your own, then once you've got those keys, you're in trouble. Once you get those keys to that property, you may well be in trouble. You need to educate yourself on the actual physical practicalities of what it is that you do when you get those keys.
Yeah. Indeed, and really go into the detail, and we'll talk about that in a moment. Yeah. But I think that kind of leads on really to our next point, because a lot of these TV programmes and indeed the property trainers, they talk about gross profit, not net profit, and there can be a big difference. Massive. So that leads us to number 2, which is get your budget right.
You've got to get your budget right. You've got to understand what costs are involved. You've got to understand, as I've said many times, the difference between profit and wages. That if you're actually physically putting effort into that, you need to take account of some sort of wage for yourself. You've got to have a contingency, and you've got to look, when things go wrong, they can go massively wrong.
And they can really unravel and get very expensive.
Oh, a project that I've been working on very, very, very recently was pitched at 64,000. There'd been £18,000 worth of extras, which could not be avoided because they were structural issues that were uncovered during the actual refurbishment. Even if a surveyor had gone in without uncovering lifting floors and actually removing parts of the roof, it would never have been seen. Stuff that you can't see can be massive. You've got to be able to take that hit. You've got to be aware that you need that elasticity in your budget. And for heaven's sake, do not go into a project if you think your budget is tight, because you will drown.
And you recommend around 20%?
I would say 20 to 25% contingency. You very likely won't have to use that, but by God, you may need it.
Yeah, indeed. So we're moving on now to tip number 3.
Right. That's about your actual client base. Now your client base consists of customers, estate agents, building regs officers, HM officers, fire officers, but it also consists of your building team. You've got to remember your building team are almost clients with you. They're all past the process. X and Y equals Z. You've got to make that whole thing actually tally up. All those trades have got their own view of what's going wrong, what they need to get done, how they need to work most efficiently, because at the end of the day, they need their cash back out. They're working, they want to get... If the electrician's holding up the plumber, who's holding up the builder, these are the relationships that you need to really, really nurture. It's those guys or those ladies, because we have women in trades as well now. It's those people who are going to actually drive that vehicle forward for you. Yeah. They are your clients as much as your customers are, as much as the estate agents, as much as anybody's. Your trades are your clientele too, and you have got to proffer good working relationships with that team.
Yeah. And treat them with respect.
Absolutely, treat them with respect. You've got to do that.
Yeah, and I think just as a little add-on, you mentioned that although you don't have to actually know how to do everything, you as a project manager, you have to have a very good understanding of the actual processes of what these people are doing.
Absolutely. You can do anything you like with budget. You can do what you like with deadlines. You can sit down there with a spreadsheet. You can work all that out. But do you know what? It's not worth the paper it's written on if you can't get the people on board. You've got to have those people not in your pocket. You've got to understand what it is that they're trying to achieve, how they're trying to work it, how it's going to make them tick, and you've got to take them along on the journey with you to take it to get it to where you need it to go. You need to have good working relationships with those people. What I would say is be friendly with your build team, but don't be their friend. You have your friends elsewhere. Don't get over familiar. Understand that we all are there for a reason, and we all have our own personal reason for being there. We all have our own reasons for being there and making the money that we're making. You've got to understand their point of view, all of their points of view, and you've got to try and make that a cohesive and effective working team.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're moving on to point number 4 now, and that one was you really wanted to say, don't get sort of emotionally tied up with the property, because I would imagine that could have a massive knock-on effect to the budget as well.
I would be living in 134 houses if we were all going to live in the house that we, you know, I have done them for a reason, for a client or for profit. Now, you've got to understand that then you are in business. But if you switch the TV on at any time, day or night, you will find a property programme on some channel somewhere 24 hours a day. And I call it the English sickness, because we are absolutely focused on property. We are completely and utterly hooked on property. Now, what that means is we're doing it from here, not from here. We're doing it from here. We get emotionally attached. I refuse to let any of my people who come to me as a mentor, or people who come to me for advice, or come to me for whatever it is, I refuse to let them continue to use any other word other than stock.
Yep.
This is a business you're in, and that property is your stock. And I use the analogy of, if you were a grocer and you couldn't bear to part with your cabbages, you're going to be in a lot of you're going to be in a mess in 6 months' time, because you've got to always work towards letting that go.
Yep.
And I am the world's worst. I find I get very, very emotionally involved with all the projects I do. It's like handing over a child at the end of the process, because I always give a lot of myself into every project.
Yeah.
Probably too much. I need to practice what I preach. But you've got to be able to let go. So it's stock, and it's business, and it's turnover.
And stick to your budget, and sort of don't you see people doing these outrageous finishes and having, you know, tiles that cost 10 times more than they need to. You've got to make it fit for purpose. 9
times out of 10, when you do that and you personalise it, the first thing that people do when they go in is they rip those tiles off.
Quite. Yeah, I think that's a good point. Very good point.
So that's it. You know, why in the name of God did you ever bother in the first place?
So what's your final tip for us, Sue?
Final tip is, if it's not fun, pack it in. You've got to be having some fun as well. I forget who it was who said, if you find something you enjoy, you'll never work a day in your life. And I don't consider that I work. I'm tired every day, and I'm not quite sure why I am, because I don't feel that I've been to work. I love it, I love it, I love it. If it doesn't float your boat, and you'll know very quickly after 1 or 2 projects, if it isn't for you, do you know what? There's no shame. Go and find something you love.
Fantastic. Well, you obviously do still love it, because you're still doing it all this time later. And I can tell. Thank you so much for sharing that knowledge. It's absolutely fantastic to hear from somebody with so much experience and such a down-to-earth approach as well, Sue. You really are an inspiration. I hope you don't mind me saying.
No, thank you.
And it's been great to have you on Property Tribes TV.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you.